Hello, everyone. So I'm going to share my, I guess I don't know if I've ever fully addressed this. I think I've mentioned this in other videos on this topic, but I just want to say this more clearly. The reason I don't bring up the extreme circumstances that women may feel obligated to have an abortion in, such as rape, such as ectopic pregnancies, such as these extreme health, reasons or to save a mother's life, is because those make up a small minority of abortions. It's not the large majority of abortions. And I had someone comment this in a comment, I guess in another video I had made, and I don't think like this is nothing against the person who brought those up, because I feel like a lot of people don't realize when I'm speaking on abortion, I'm purposely not talking about ectopic pregnancies. I'm not talking about women who've experienced SA, sexual trauma. I'm not talking about where it's to save a woman's life. Even though I've kind of addressed those in other videos, those, like, I'm against abortion. I'm not attacking abortion. That makes up the small minority of abortion that most people who are pro-life, even if they still believe it's wrong to end an innocent human being's life, you would say it should be legal under these very extreme circumstances only, and all other ones should be outlawed. It's like all of these extreme circumstances that people love to bring up in support of abortion to justify, because the best justification for abortion is the mother's life has to be at risk, or a crime has to be committed against a woman, a sexual assault has to occur, those being the best circumstances that justify an abortion. I think that says a lot, but I also think the reason that people who are pro choice or pro abortion love to bring up those extreme circumstances that do not make up the large majority of abortions is because it creates a emotional response. It's a way to emotionally manipulate people into believing like, oh well, abortions are happening because women are being raped and women are, their lives are at risk and all of those things. It's like it's another form of manipulation, in my opinion, that the abortion industry uses to bait women into believing abortions are happening only because of these reasons. But what's actually happening is we're manipulating women using the trauma of a small minority woman who experienced these traumatic things. Now, yes, there could be a lot of women who've experienced SA, but most SA does not result in a pregnancy. It's like every person who's been SA'd is not someone getting an abortion. It's a very small percentage of them. And as someone who is strongly against SA, rape, I know a lot of people in my personal life who've experienced that. I would never support. I'm not going to defend something that I know is wrong, and I wouldn't wish that on anyone or for any woman to experience. All of these also, the extreme circumstances where a woman would feels obligated to have an abortion, those aren't experiences I would wish for a woman to have in to begin with. Like, I'm not wishing for someone to have to experience a horrendous experience such as, an ectopic pregnancy and almost losing their lives. I wouldn't wish for someone to be raped. So it's just like, why would I support abortion for extenuating circumstances that I wouldn't wish for someone to have to experience? Like, I'm not gonna say, yeah, I support abortion because I want, there's these horrible crimes and circumstances taking place and that's why we need it, but that's not the majority reason it's being used, and that's not the majority of abortions happening. So what's really happening here is we're using a small minority of abortions that have this very emotional, you know, get this emotional triggering response from people to justify abortions for those who aren't even having those extreme circumstances. It's like, it's another form of manipulation. I also feel like what the abortion industry does is it's using the people, those women with those circumstances. It's using their trauma as a way to gain access to abortion for women who don't have the same experiences or trauma. It's almost like, well, you were allowed to do this because of these really harmful experiences that was it's really justified, but I haven't experienced any of that and I still want abortion for these other reasons. So why they want you to focus on the small minority of abortions that are because of that, those extreme circumstances that are very emotional, that no person would ever want for another person to experience. They want you to focus on those because they don't want you to realize that the majority of abortions are not because of these reasons that most people could say, oh, this is a justified reason that we maybe should allow abortion. They want you to believe that that's the majority of them. That's why they always bring up people who've been essay. They always bring up ectopic pregnancy. They always bring up the extremes. Ectopic pregnancy, by the way, is like 2 to 3% of all pregnancies. So that's not a huge percentage of women having ectopic pregnancies either. It's just like there's some emotional manipulation happening. Um, and I recognize that after looking at the percentages of what types of abortions were because of those actually because of those reasons. I also just want to mention something that I have addressed. Ectopic pregnancies, in my opinion, are should not even be considered the same as abortion, because the most severe ectopic pregnancies are usually women who didn't even realize they were pregnant. Typically don't know they're even pregnant yet, and they're rushed to the emergency room because they're having these symptoms. And the surgery for an ectopic pregnancy is not the same procedure for an abortion. You're removing a piece of that fallopian tube um, to save the woman's life. And the intent is not just to harm the child. I would say like there's a difference between like an elective abortion where it's really only the only intent is ending the life of that child, versus, oh, well, I'm trying to save the mother's life, and in order to save the mother's life I have to remove their fallopian tube, and the zygote, whatever, the baby that's implanted not in the correct place is not going to be able to survive at this stage of the pregnancy outside of the mother's womb that it never made it to. I also did some research on ectopic pregnancies and found something really interesting that is not being told to women, such as there's a greater risk of ectopic pregnancy when you are using long-term birth control. So I don't think a lot of people, and that the documents I read, this is something that I feel like, do your own research, of course, but I found a study that said a pregnancy that happens when you're on a long-term birth control, which, the risk of getting pregnant on a birth while taking birth control is supposed to be minimum, right? But should you get pregnant using a long-term birth control, you are 50%, there's a 50% chance you will have an ectopic pregnancy. Why? Because those long-term birth controls pretty much work by trying to block the egg from reaching the uterus. Like, that's how they prevent pregnancy. So what is kind of happening is the birth control works by preventing an egg from implanting in your uterus. So if you have a birth control that's specifically trying to stop a fertilized egg from doing what it's supposed to do, which is implant in your uterus, you create that problem basically The birth control creates the problem of ectopic pregnancy. Now, they're not saying it causes it, that's not the language that it works. But if you read between the lines, well, if the birth control is designed to prevent an egg from a fertilized egg from reaching your uterus, and an egg is fertilized and it can't get to the uterus, it has no choice but to implant in that fallopian tube. Now, most cases, an ectopic pregnancy dissolves on its own, but in some cases it doesn't, and that's where you have the, you know, the mother's life is at risk. So after doing a little bit more research on that, I also found that there's a higher risk of ectopic pregnancy even after not if you've been on long-term birth control. It said for over like 3 years there's a higher risk after stopping not taking it of an ectopic pregnancy. So that's something that a lot of women maybe don't know. If you're taking long-term birth control, there's not a lot of research out there about the risk. There's also a lot of harm that is not being told to women, risk with taking birth control. I believe a lot of infertility issues that women experience, why infertility seems to be on the rise, I definitely believe it's linked to birth control. And that's not being taught to women because they don't want you to see that connection. You know that the birth control you're taking has might have some effects, negative effects on in your ability to get pregnant in the future. Now they will tell you, oh, it's there's no risk, you should be able to, but you know there's not. There is studies that show there's some correlations. I'm not going to say cause, but infertility is on the rise. You can look that up. Um, and there are studies that show there's correlations there. Whether or not those are being fully disclosed or informed to women, probably not. But that's a whole nother video I guess I could get into. But basically, you know, I wouldn't wish a woman to experience an ectopic pregnancy. I wouldn't wish for a woman to experience SA. I wouldn't wish for a woman to experience any of those extreme circumstances. So I'm never addressing those extreme circumstances. My stance on why I'm against abortion is because the majority of abortions are not for those reasons. They're because women are willingly having sex, knowing the risk of pregnancy, not wanting the responsibility of the pregnancy, and choosing to end their own child's life. And the problem with this that I really have is that women are not protecting their wombs. Like, if you really want to get to the root of the issue, like, why are women so willing to sleep with men that they don't want to be the fathers of their children, that they don't want to be their future husbands? They're willing to risk their womb, create another life with a person that doesn't even respect them enough to marry them. Maybe there's not even a relationship with it. It's a hookup, whatever, a one night stand, right? And you've gotten pregnant, and now a woman, because you chose to sleep with someone without wanting the consequences of pregnancy, and now you have become pregnant because the consequence of having sex, there's always a risk of pregnancy regardless of how much birth control you use. There is not one birth control on the planet that is 100% effective except for not sleeping with men, not having sex. Pregnancy is 100% preventable if you never have sex, by the way. Anyways, that's why I speak about it from that perspective, because that's the majority of abortions. Majority of abortions are not because a woman's been raped, is not because a woman's having a ectopic pregnancy. That is not the majority. It is a very small minority of abortions because of those reasons. And it wouldn't make sense for me to be pro-life and attack the small minority of abortions that are happening. That I would even say, from a legalistic perspective, we can allow abortion for just those reasons, but all the other reasons it shouldn't be allowed just because someone doesn't want the responsibility of their child, was being reckless, was whatever. But people, like I said, they abuse the victims of these traumatic experience to gain access to abortion for their own personal reasons, whether they've experienced those extreme circumstances or not. Like I said, I do think that's manipulative. If you support abortion, whether it's because someone's had an extreme circumstances or not, don't bring up someone else's trauma to justify abortion for someone who's not experienced that. If you're okay with someone having an abortion for any reason, don't bring up someone else's trauma to justify it. Unless you're going to say, well, I only support it for these reasons. If you only support it for those extreme reasons, that's one thing. But if you support it for the, every other reason too, I feel like you're manipulating. It's a manipulation tactic to use this extreme emotional circumstance so that people who don't even experience those can still gain access to that thing, you know don't that's why I don't like when people use those in arguments, because like I said, I'm not pro-life because I'm trying to attack women having ectopic pregnancies or people who've been SA'd. Like, that's not my heart, that's not who I am. I wouldn't wish for any woman to experience have those experiences. I wouldn't wish abortion on a woman. I feel like, knowing how horrible abortion is, I wouldn't wish for a woman to get an abortion. It's like we're acting as if abortion is a good thing for a woman to have to get. It's really not. It's a traumatic experience for the woman. It's ending a child's life. It's putting, it's these, and then even in the extreme circumstances, right? There's a trauma that's happened. There's something, it's like no one is celebrating abortion but the people who are doing it for the most selfish of reasons. The people who are celebrating abortions is what makes the abortion industry, is what makes people not stop supporting it, because you're not treating it like it's a serious choice. I see people bragging about it online. I mentioned how I read a comment talking about, well, I sent my baby back to its maker, return to sender. Like, there's people joking literally about ending the life of their own children in their wombs as if it's just, you know, a normal thing that people just do. There's like no empathy there anymore, because I do think like it's just become like it's a joke for some people at this point. So anyways, back to what I was saying. I really think the real issue is women are not protecting their wombs anymore. The fact that so many women are willing to risk their womb, creating a new life with someone who who may or may not be in their child's life. And then it's like the solution to that isn't, abortion doesn't really solve that issue anyways either. It's just like abortion pretty much just encourages promiscuity. It doesn't stop the root of abortion. It literally just creates more of it, because the abortion industry profits off of unwanted pregnancies. So if we convince women that they should be sleeping around because, it's their body and they're allowed to do whatever they want with their body, and sleeping around is empowering for women, and then women believe that they're sleeping around with these men who don't respect them, don't care about them, don't value them, are not committed to them, don't want to spend a lifetime with them, don't care about raising or starting a family with them. It's like, what are women actually gaining from sleeping with these men? You're risking your health. Their STDs on the rise. You're risking your health. You're risking your womb. And then in the chance that you create a child, now you believe that the best problem to that is ending the life of your own child in your womb, which is going to leave a lot of women with a lifetime trauma. because abortion is not an experience you should want to have to experience. And I don't care how many people will say, oh well, at least they had the choice to make it. It's like, okay, people have a lot of choices people make a lot of choices that they shouldn't make. People make a lot of bad choices in their life that they might regret because it comes with a consequence they weren't prepared to handle. And when someone tells you that the trauma of an abortion leaves people with regret, I've seen so many comments of women saying how they regretted their abortion, they wish they chose to keep their baby, and they can't undo it. And they said they carry that weight with them for a lifetime. For a lifetime. You really think that's the best choice someone could make? And it's like people are acting like adoption is the worst thing a child could have or experience. Adoption, like, you literally are villainizing giving a child up for adoption to glorify killing that child instead. It's like all of these other options that the child is that support the life of that child, people are trying to villainize that. And I'm not saying like adoption is perfect or foster care is perfect. We could be putting a lot more money towards bettering the foster care system and for making adoption more affordable for families who want to adopt a kid, but don't have $75,000 up front. um there's so much like social programs. It's like we're funding abortion when we could be funding the life of that child. We could be funding families who need help because they're struggling to care for their kids. And yes, there's other agencies that work with children in that sense, but specifically for like people who want to adopt and bettering the foster care system so that people and children going into that system are met with better qualified professionals. I don't know. I just feel like the issue there's other issues I feel like outside of abortion. Yes, that people try to say is the reason we need abortion, but the root of it is just like ending an innocent human being should never be the cost of have it's like the goal of what am I trying to say? The choice to end an innocent human being's life should not be what's normalized the most out of all of these other options, right? Is not the one. I don't know, the one. It's like you support the death of a child more than you support the life of children. And then it's like pretending like you value the life of children already in foster care by supporting ending the lives of children who aren't in foster care makes zero sense to me. When people say bring up foster kids as a justification for why people need abortion, I mentioned that in another video. It's a really nonsensical argument that when you follow the logic of that statement to its conclusion doesn't really give you a great moral objective. But I digress. The biggest, I feel like, reason I really just don't support the abortion industry is just because the premise that the best option is to end an innocent human being's life is just not something I will support as being a good thing. It's just not what I will support. And then, like I said, the root of it is just people are not thinking about the long-term implications of their actions. Women are not protecting their womb. Truthfully, I feel like that's the best way to say it. Like, protect your womb. You shouldn't want to risk having children with just anybody. You should want to protect. Why are we giving men who don't respect you children? And then, like I said, the solution to that is like, this is what I'm saying. Why the abortion industry pretty much enforces, or what's the word? The abortion industry literally is promoting promiscuity without, like, it's blatant and obvious to me, but I really think it's not, like, people don't recognize that. Because if you know, like, I can sleep around, and if the worst case scenario I get pregnant, I have the option to get an abortion and not have to deal with a child, being in the back of that person's mind is making them make a worse choice with who they are going to sleep with. Like, when me being pro life, and knowing I would never get an abortion, it's like, I don't know, this is the best way to say it. You are a lot pickier, a lot more protective of your womb when you're not thinking of abortion as being, you're not using abortion as birth control, essentially. If abortion is not an option for you, you are going to make a lot better choices with whom you are willing to risk sleeping with. I'm not risking sleeping with someone that I don't want to be the future father of my children if I know I'm not able to get an abortion. And you know what's crazy? Even the people who are pro choice understand that, because when Roe versus Wade was being overturned and they thought they were losing their rights, and all these women were threatening to be abstinent and to be celibate, it's like, oh, so if abortion's not an option, now you're saying you won't sleep around anymore. It's like they understand that it's not worth the risk to sleep with these men if I don't have abortion as the option, if I get pregnant and have to have the responsibility and don't have the option to abort that child and have to be responsible for it. They're not willing to risk sleeping with those men anymore. They're like, we need abortion. If you want us to continue sleeping around with you, we need abortion. So I feel like that made it very obvious to me that the abortion side understands the responsibility of sex, and the responsibility of choosing to have sex plays in whether or not someone is getting an abortion or not. So a lot, like I said, or like I said before, women are more willing to sleep around. They make worse choices with their partners because of abortion. It's not really helping women in any the sense of, how is a woman getting an abortion is not really helping her in the long run. It's literally just creating a lifelong trauma for that person. It's like, whatever this person says, well, I don't have the money right now. Aborting that child is not going to get you more money. It's like, it's not even let's say this. The cost analysis of it. It's like there's not an immediate benefit other than, oh well, now I don't have to worry about another life. Um and that's more so you basically saying, well, the cost of this person's life is is less valuable than their actual life. Basically saying, like, how do I say this? Let me rephrase that, what I'm saying. So, if someone is saying, well, I'm going to abort my child because I don't have the money to care for this child, right? You're basically saying the life of your child matters less than the amount of money it costs to raise a child. Basically, it's like, children are too expensive. Um, and therefore, your life as existing. Uh, I feel like there's not a great way to phrase that. So I'm going to rephrase the scenario. Basically, it's like, is your life valuable? Because it's like the value of someone's life isn't the money it costs for you to exist, right? It costs money, yes, to live and to survive in the world, but your life is more valuable than money. right? So when people say it's like the money reason, there's people in third world countries that have 10 kids, right? They view their children as more valuable than any amount of money. Like the cost to raise that child is not what they're factoring in to being the value of that child's life. It's like the life of that child is more valuable than any money. And it's like that's their most precious, that is more precious to them, more valuable to them than any amount of money. And you know, people can argue, well, they're in poverty. Yes, they're in poverty, but they're alive and they're grateful for their lives. It's like when someone is poor, all they have is their life, right? But they're alive. They're not dead. There's a value in being alive. It's almost like that's why I said people value death. The abortion industry values death more than it values life in the most, like, in my opinion, toxic way ever. And it very quickly turns into eugenics. Um, anyways, I think that's all I really wanted to say. I'm not addressing extreme circumstances because those extreme circumstances I feel like are not an issue for a pro-life stance, and even the most pro-life states will allow um abortions under those extreme circumstances. So I feel like I said, it's a brought those extreme circumstances are often brought up to take away the focus from what is the majority of abortions, which is just people willingly having sex and not wanting the responsibility of raising a child. And I feel like the choice should be made before. Like, if you know you don't want a child, get your tubes tied. And that's why I also argued before. I was like, you know, your body, your choice. If that was fighting for women's right to have their tubes tied, that's actually your body. And that actually should be your choice, right? And it's funny how people will argue against that use of my choice, because they're like, well, having your tubes tied is a permanent thing that can't be reversed to your body, and therefore, you know, that's not the best option for a woman. I was like, but you don't care about the permanent ending of the child's life that you're ending via an abortion? I don't understand that. It's like, how can you say you fighting your body, your choice, my body, my choice applies to ending your child's life in your womb that is permanent, but not to your getting your own tubes tied, which is actually your body. You know, your child's life, the body being aborted is not your body. And every pregnant person knows that the child in their womb is not their actual body. It exists within their body. It's not their body. I mean, the whole like framework of my body, my choice, I feel like is just, I don't know. I feel like it's another manipulative slogan. Pretty much everything in the abortion industry is propaganda. Propaganda to convince women that they need abortion. And that's why I feel like I'm not an outlier in the sense like, oh, I'm just doing everything I believe. It just has to go against whatever principles. It's really just I'm not falling for the propaganda or the manipulation. It's like once you stand on a principle, that a principle, a moral objective, I would say, and you stand on that, it's like it doesn't work. And if I stand on a truth, you know, I stand on an objective truth, not a subjective one. um and I think that's why there's nothing that ever changes my mind on the issue. Like, there's nothing anyone could say to me that would convince me to be pro choice, like pro ending. I'm like, I can't physically support the purposeful ending of a innocent human being. Even if I can concede to allow for it for those legal reasons of extreme circumstances, it doesn't mean that I would say that's the best option. So that's all.